For decades, Iran sat atop a treasure trove, vast reserves of oil. Its strategic location bordering the Soviet Union during the Cold War made it even more valuable. It served as a buffer zone, but also a potential gateway for Soviet influence in the region. Iran's vast oil reserves weren't just a source of wealth, but a critical pawn in the Cold War power struggle. Nestled between the Soviet Union and the West, Iran served as a possible bridgehead for Soviet influence. The discovery of oil in the early 20th century intensified this geopolitical game. Western powers, particularly Britain, rushed to secure concessions from the Shah's government, often through unequal treaties known as capitulations. These treaties granted Western companies extensive rights to operate in Iran with minimal benefit to the Iranian people. This resentment simmered for decades, fueling nationalist movements in Iran. Nationalist leaders like Mohammad Mossadegh rose to prominence, tapping into a deep well of public discontent with foreign domination of Iran's resources. In 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh's rise to power marked a turning point. A charismatic leader who rose through democratic elections, Mossadegh tapped into a deep well of public discontent with the Shah's regime. He yearned to break free from Western domination, particularly over Iran's oil resources. The Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, on the other hand, was an increasingly autocratic monarch who relied heavily on Western support, particularly financial aid from the US and Britain, to maintain his lavish lifestyle. He became increasingly out of touch with the needs of his people, further widening the gulf between him and the Iranian public. Mossadegh's populist message resonated with a population yearning for a fairer share of their country's wealth and a more independent future. In 1951, Mossadegh made a bold move by nationalizing Iran's oil industry, seizing control from the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, AIOC. This wasn't just about economics. It was a symbolic act of defiance against decades of perceived exploitation by the British. The AIOC had enriched itself for years while Iran saw minimal benefit. Mossadegh promised to use oil revenue to uplift the Iranian people, fund development projects like hospitals and schools, and improve living standards. This resonated deeply with a population yearning for a fairer share of their homeland wealth. However, nationalization also had immediate economic consequences. Britain imposed crippling sanctions on Iran, disrupting oil exports and causing a sharp decline in government revenue. This created economic hardship for ordinary Iranians, a situation the Shah and his Western allies exploited to portray Mossadegh as an economic incompetent. The West also pressured other nations to stop buying Iranian oil, further straining the Iranian economy. The British government saw nationalization as a direct attack on their economic interests and a potential domino effect. If Iran could nationalize its oil, other oil-producing colonies might follow suit, jeopardizing British control over vast energy resources. Britain pressured Iran through economic sanctions, attempting to cripple its economy and force Mossadegh's hand. They also launched a propaganda campaign portraying Mossadegh as an unstable leader who would drive Iran into economic ruin. The Cold War added another layer of urgency. The West, haunted by the specter of communism and emboldened by the recent Chinese Communist Revolution, viewed Iran's oil as a strategic lifeline. Iranian oil could fuel Western economies and counter Soviet influence in the Middle East, a region increasingly seen as a battleground in the Cold War. The thought of a communist-leaning government controlling Iran's vast oil reserves was a terrifying prospect for Western leaders, particularly in the US under President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who saw Iran as a potential domino falling to Soviet influence. Iran's Communist Party, the Tudeh Party, though relatively small, was used by Western powers to stoke fears of a communist takeover. Faced with limited success through economic pressure, the CIA devised a covert operation codenamed Operation Ajax. Its objective: remove Mossadegh from power. Led by operatives like Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the CIA employed a multifaceted approach, exploiting existing political and social fault lines within Iran. Propaganda became a key weapon. The CIA launched a sophisticated campaign portraying Mossadegh as a dangerous communist sympathizer who would surrender Iran to Soviet domination. They used leaflets, fake news articles distributed through sympathetic Iranian newspapers, and even radio broadcasts to spread disinformation, preying on existing Cold War anxieties within Iran and abroad. This propaganda aimed to erode public trust in Mossadegh and paint him as a leader leading Iran down a path of economic ruin and Soviet domination. Beyond propaganda, the CIA resorted to bribery. Iranian politicians, particularly those known to be critical of Mossadegh or sympathetic to the Shah, were offered substantial sums of money to defect from his government or spread anti-Mossadegh sentiment. Newspapers were bribed to publish articles critical of the prime minister, while radio stations sympathetic to the Shah received financial backing to amplify their message. This financial manipulation aimed to create a perception of widespread dissent against Mossadegh and weaken his government from within. The CIA also exploited existing fault lines within Iranian society. The National Socialist Party, Fatah-e-Islam, a right-wing nationalist group opposed to Mossadegh's secular reforms and his perceived communist leanings, became a target. By providing financial and logistical support to these groups, the CIA essentially manipulated domestic politics and destabilized the Iranian government. The agency's efforts weren't limited to manipulating public opinion. They also targeted key figures within the Iranian military. Through a combination of bribes and threats, they encouraged defections from Mossadegh's government. High-ranking military officials who remained loyal to the prime minister were arrested or neutralized, crippling Mossadegh's ability to resist the coup. In August 1953, the Shah, likely encouraged by the CIA, attempted to dismiss Mossadegh, triggering a political firestorm. Initially, pro-Mossadegh demonstrations erupted in the streets, fearing the Shah was staging a coup. This genuine outpouring of support for the prime minister demonstrated his popularity among the Iranian people. The CIA, however, wasn't about to let the coup falter. They poured money into funding pro-Shah demonstrations, manipulating these protests to appear larger and more widespread than they actually were. Paid agitators were used to infiltrate crowds and incite violence, further undermining public support for Mossadegh. Meanwhile, the CIA pressured key figures within the Iranian military. Through a combination of bribes and threats, they encouraged defections from Mossadegh's government. High-ranking military officials who remained loyal to the prime minister were arrested or neutralized, crippling Mossadegh's ability to resist the coup. With superior organization, resources, and a ruthless approach, the CIA-backed forces overpowered Mossadegh's supporters. Mossadegh's forces, lacking the resources and effective communication to counter the propaganda and intimidation tactics, were quickly overwhelmed. The coup unfolded swiftly. Mossadegh was arrested, his government dissolved, and the Shah returned to power. The West celebrated the success of Operation Ajax, viewing it as a victory against communism and securing access to Iranian oil. The Shah, now firmly in control, cracked down on dissent and opposition, further alienating the Iranian public. The euphoria surrounding the coup was short-lived. The overthrow of a democratically elected leader left a deep scar on the Iranian psyche. Iranians felt betrayed by foreign interference in their internal affairs, particularly by the US and Britain. This fostered a deep distrust of Western powers that continues to resonate today. The US, in particular, became synonymous with meddling and regime change in the eyes of many Iranians. Furthermore, the coup weakened democratic ideals within Iran. The suppression of dissent created a climate of fear and repression. The Shah's authoritarian rule stifled political participation and further alienated the Iranian people. This ultimately fueled a desire for a more representative government, a yearning that would contribute to the Islamic Revolution in 1979. The overthrow of Mossadegh also had a significant impact on US-Iran relations. Iranians viewed the US as a puppet master behind the Shah's regime. This resentment would culminate in events like the Iran hostage crisis, 1979 to 1981, further straining relations for decades to come. Operation Ajax raises critical questions about the ethics of foreign intervention. Was undermining a democratically elected government for geopolitical gain ever justifiable? The long-term consequences suggest otherwise. The seeds of discord sown by the coup ultimately led to instability and revolution. Understanding historical events like Operation Ajax is vital. By learning from past mistakes, we can strive for more peaceful solutions to international challenges. The question remains, does foreign intervention in the name of national security ever truly achieve lasting stability, or does it simply sow the seeds for future conflict? Can intervention ever be justified, and if so, under what circumstances? These are complex issues that continue to challenge policymakers today. The story of Iran's coup is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the unintended consequences of foreign meddling and the importance of respecting the democratic aspirations of nations. It also serves as a stark reminder of the importance of transparency and accountability in government actions. The revelation of the CIA's role in Operation Ajax decades later eroded public trust in the US government and continues to fuel conspiracy theories in Iran. The 1953 coup in Iran continues to cast a long shadow. It serves as a reminder of the complexities of international relations, the dangers of foreign intervention, and the enduring desire for self-determination. Understanding this pivotal moment in history is essential for fostering a future where diplomacy and respect for national sovereignty pave the way for a more peaceful and stable world order. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this.
It's London Lee.